Hello, good morning or good afternoon or good night, whatever you are. Okay. Now, uh, today I wanted to make this piece for a long time because I often see that there are voices that are important that are not listened to. In this case, we will be talking about the minority that once was a majority in the Crimea Peninsula called the Tatars. If you don't know what the Tatars are, the Tatars are the people that were there before. They came with the Mongol invasions and they occupied an area where other minorities also continue to exist. And I believe some of them still exist. Like, for example, the Greeks and the Jewish and a lot of people there. You know, if you look into the history of Crimea, it's a very interesting one. Now, the first thing we have to understand is this: historically, the Crimea Peninsula has been a part of what we call the Proto-Ukrainian state. Okay, this was true up until I believe I have the piece here to show you in 1783 when the Russians occupied it. And until that point, the Tatars have always been a majority in that area. Secondly, the majority of the Tatars are Muslim. Even if looking at them, or perhaps their habits, you would not consider them a typical Muslim. But then again, if you look at most Turkish people, you also will not consider them typical Muslim. You know, that stereotype we have of covered women and men with big mustache and whatever. You know, they are essentially people that, like any other Europeans of that area, are part of the Turkish people that invaded that area, that occupied that area, just like the Germanics or invaded the rest of Europe or whatever. You know, it's a part of our history. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you that these are European people, okay? That you can consider a Tatar a brother as a European, a different one, but we are all different. But this is important so that you understand that we are not talking about some kind of bow and arrow people that lived there and that suddenly were graced with uh, colonization by the brave and Christian Russians. No, this was a highly developed culture. This was a culture that had a lot of aspects, and that was, unfortunately for them, or whatever, I don't know. It's not me to judge history. Neither should we judge history in that way because it's illogical. Because it already happened. What are you going to do now? Hmm? You're going to revive the dead? Don't think so. But they were a majority up to that point of 1783, and right now they compose around 15% of the population. The Tatars consider themselves Ukrainians. The Tatars are a part of Ukraine. The Tatars are a part of the national culture of Ukraine, the state, that also has other minorities. You have to understand this because this is important. Do not understand Crimea has a part of Russia that Nikita Khrushchev, during the times of the Soviet Union, because I think he was Ukraine or from Ukraine, decided to give to Ukraine as a revenge against the poor little Russians. Because this was a narrative that even fooled me until I got myself out of my narrative and decided to investigate it further. So, when the Russian Empire in 1783 invaded that region and occupied Crimea, Crimea stayed as it was, a part of the proto-state of Ukraine. Let's call it like this, because Ukraine existed with the Kingdom of Kiev before even Russia existed. When the Russians were still laying down furs and carcasses of animals in the iced river in Moscow, Okay, the Ukrainians already had a civilization and kings and queens and a long history and a long culture. Yes, this is the truth. And if you don't believe me, well, grab yourselves a history book, not a Russian one, please. Grab yourself a history book. I don't know if you don't like the European ones, try a Japanese one or a Korean or whatever you want to read, and go read it so you have an unbiased opinion. Okay. I would advise also Portuguese history books because they are very unbiased. Because we even punish ourselves in the history books. Now, let's continue. But what essentially you have to understand is that from the first day, this area was a part of what Ukraine is. This is basically the seaport of Ukraine. Now, Portuguese sailors would sail to these waters to buy grain and sell olive oil, to sell wine, to sell oranges that are very popular in that area. Up to until this day, I think Portugal in Turkish in the Turkish language in Turkey means orange because our oranges have always been famous and they are still very good, especially the ones from the Algarve region. The climate, but and now we are having people simply discussing Crimea as if the minorities and the people that live in the bloody land have no say in it. They are assuming Crimea is going to be Russian. I have not seen, except for the position of the Ukrainian state, that is, we want the Russians out of all of Ukraine, and this includes Crimea. I've seen people talking about, oh, let's just give Crimea to the Ukrainians, to the Russians, sorry. Oh, let's just do this. Oh, let's just do that. And they don't listen to the people that actually are a part of it. Why? Because they are only 15%. You have to also understand the historical setting of this. Because even though they are only 15%, there are historical reasons for this. And the first historical reason is forced conversion, for example. It's forced relocation in which the Russian Empire was an expert. You know, I have found a lot of historical, how will I call it? A lot of historical common procedures in the Russian Empire and the Assyrians. If you don't know who the Assyrians were, go read up about it. The Assyrians were essentially a military with a state, but not in the sense of Prussia, where, for example, they were a state, they were a military state with a state, but they were administrating different regions. Okay, and their national cohesion was achieved through the military. But the Assyrians, they conquered and exploited and basically crushed everything in their path. They were a fearsome empire that went down in flames. The last king died in their burning palace, murdered by a coalition of all the known nations of those days. It was the only way they were able to destroy him. And he and his people disappeared into history. Even their god, Hasur, was a war god, well, that wanted blood, wanted to conquer, wanted to destroy, and wanted to submit. And the Assyrians would arrive, like they did, for example, in Israel. They would arrive, they would deport a part of the population, especially those more troublesome. They would send them off to another part of the empire, and then they would grab population from somewhere inside of their empire, and they would install that population there and force them to live there. This was made to break the national cohesion of states. Because if you remove half of the population of a state and you replace it with something else, that state won't be able to rise up and attack you and rebel and call for the reestablishment of the ancient order. So this was a very effective way, and the Russians do exactly that. They did it in Prussia, in East Prussia. They expelled all the German settlers that were there that had still not settlers, sorry, German inhabitants that had not left. Prussia, for example, they didn't do that. Maybe they Germanicized, let's call it like this, a lot of populations, but often that happened due to simple, I don't know, how will I call it, for osmosis, I don't know, because people would simply acquire the same habits as the rest of the kingdom. you know and it happened often. It happened elsewhere here in Europe. There are Slavic peoples that arrived at Germany, for example, and that took on German habits, and because they was physically equal or similar or the same, they simply blended it. But the Russians, no. In Kaliningrad they expelled everyone. Poles, Germans, they didn't care. Get out of here. And they do this everywhere they go. And if you tell me this, oh, you just don't like the Russians and whatever. No, I don't like them very much, but I don't hate them. I don't hate anyone. That is a ridiculous idea to have. But what the Russians did, all of this to tell you this, is that they arrived in Crimea and they did just that. They expelled people, and 15% of them remained to this day. And now you understand why I consider the opinion of these people so important. Because number one, they are inhabitants of that area. Number two, they have a right to decide their future. They have a right, and even if they are not a majority, they have a right, and their voice is very worthy to hear. So I'm going to show you this piece. This is in TVP World. I ask you please to also tvpworld.com. I advise you to go and visit the site. Go give them some views, even subscribe to the news channel. Why not? If you want to. I find it's always good to have more than one source of information. So this was not the only site I went to, but I think the piece in this one is very well made, very well put, and very succinct, a very summary explanation. Let's see. Let me just focus them. Okay. Tatars vote to oppose any recognition of Crimea as part of Russia. This gentleman right here is the head of the executive body representing the Crimean Tatars, Mr. Refat Shubarov. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this gentleman here spoke amongst this was during the time before cowardly dog, like I call him right now, Mr. Trump, run off the the agreements, the attempted peace treaty for Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, which is basically to surrender to Russia. But sorry, but this came when they were still talking about giving away Crimea to the Russians, and that the U.S. should recognize the annexation of Crimea. Just to say that in Europe, perhaps only Hungary would recognize that. But let's read it because this is important. Okay. Crimea has been under Russian occupation since 2014. Okay. Moscow illegally annexed the territory following a sham referendum held under military occupation without international observers. The famous Green Man, Little Green Man. Russia simply dumped military units by surprise on Crimea, occupied it, and said they held a referendum, which was uh, during the times of the dictatorship here in Portugal. My grandfather would receive an envelope containing a small paper with a box and a cross. My grandfather would then proceed to vote by putting an X in the box, signing it, and sending it back in the mail. And that was considering voting here too. So every government in the former Portuguese dictatorship or authoritarian regime, whatever you want to call it, was always democratically elected because everyone voted for them. Perhaps because there was no one else in the ballot, and if you didn't vote, if you did not put your name in that little envelope and send it back, you would find the secret police knocking at your door and asking you why did you not fulfill your civic duty of voting. Okay, so this is the crap elections we are talking here about, gunpoint elections. And now on Tuesday, so just for reference, this piece was dated from the 22 of April of 2025. On Tuesday, the Medjils, one of the former bodies representing the Crimea Tatar people, said that any move to recognize Crimea as Russian would violate international law. And I agree with them fully. Refat Shubarov, the body's chairman, said in a statement, Crimea is the homeland of the indigenous Crimean Tatar people and an integral part of Ukraine. Accordingly, no one, no one, I emphasize, decided, can decide the fate of the crime of Crimea under any circumstances, except for the Ukrainian state and the Crimean Tatar people. Now, this is the part that I talked about. That historically, the majority of the peninsula prior to Russia's conquest in 1783, they were prior to all this they were the majority, and now they make up about 15% of the Crimean population. This is then the other part that refer to the foreseen answer of Ukraine, that was to say no. And look, you can see here. If you are interested in this, I advise you to read this. Surgunlik, exile, 80th anniversary of the Soviet deportation of Crimean Tatars. Go to this site and press here and take a look and see what the Soviets did. You should. You should see that. You should see the ugly face of what Russia means. Now, continuing. Why is this so important? Tell me, my friend, why are you reporting this and why are you talking so hardly about it, with such emphasis? I am talking about this because this is important. Because these are the people that live there. You know, these are the people that they are probably hiding now in Russia. Sorry, they are probably now hiding in the Ukraine. They are probably fighting in the front lines for their land, or they are living in Crimea under the occupation of these animals. Unable to speak, unable to do anything except submit. And these people want one thing: they want their land back. They want their place in the world, and they have a right to have a place in the world. Everyone has a right to have a place in the world. Everyone needs their space. Everyone needs it. You know, and you ask me, why do you feel so strongly about this? Because I heard stories. As I told you before, I'm part German. And my German part came from East Prussia, where Germans, Poles, Baltic people, Christians, and Jews lived together. First came Herr Hitler, then came the Soviets. And I tell this story that my grandfather told me, that his cousins told him. I won't go into too much detail right now, but what happened to the town where we live, or village, you should call it a village perhaps, was this. The Soviets arrived, they plundered the village, just at the start. Fortunately, my family had already moved to South Germany to I think the area of Munich, I think, where we had relatives. Fortunately, they were able to do that. So, except for the three or four family members that were able to return alive from the East Front, there was no one there of my family, but they arrived at that village. First, they plundered it. Secondly, they burned it. Thirdly, they erased it. And fourth, they covered it up all in dirty to cover their crimes. And even the people they found perhaps there and they shot and killed or deported to some gulag in Russia to die. Okay. And they sold a forest over it. So if I go back right now to the area where I know, where I was told that village would be, where my forefathers lived for centuries, I will find nothing. My history erased. And you ask me, why do I think this is important? It is important because I see myself in, I don't know, in 100 years' time, sitting perhaps, if they are lucky, somewhere in Ukraine, being a Tatar, and knowing that my homeland exists no more. This is why I find it important. This is why I find it relevant. And this is why I would never, never shut up about it. And why? Why should I not talk? Because the Tatars are Muslims? Because they are not exactly the same type of European as I am? You have to understand one thing. If we can breed with each other, we are of the same species. Do you understand this? If you can fuck someone and breed with him, he's of your species. We have different characteristics because we evolved, we adapted in different parts of the world. The one of us that went up north or to the colder regions, we lost melanin because we did not need it. This is why, for example, if you know a bit about your biology, you will find that it's easier for a dark skinned person to lose their dark skin than for a paler person to recover melanin. Because I base my life in bloody facts, in bloody science, because there is no other way of basing your life. If you start basing your life in religion, and I don't blame you, I also have my religious views, but I simply do not let them take over my conscience, my reality, because reality does not care about our emotions, it does not care about our views, it does not care about bloody nothing. We all could be extinct tomorrow and no one would care. The earth would not cry for our passing. The earth would move and revolve and turn our cities into dust, turn our bones into dust, turn us all back into the atoms that we were. And I know this is a hard vision to have about things. I know it's scary. It's scary to know that you are not important. But me, you, everyone, we are nothing. And when I hear religious people, oh, they are trying to spread these ideas so that we do not understand the God's love and blah 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 blah. What are you fucking talking about, you idiot? That is nothing of what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we are important precisely because we have the ability to know that we are nothing. You know that the 70s band Kansas, I think, Dust in the Wind, we are nothing but dust in the wind. That is what we are, dust in the wind. Tomorrow we will die and nothing of this will matter. What we have to do is find ways to live correctly now. This is why, for example, when people talk about immigration, and I have talked about my ideas, I have said all we have to do is to control it, to understand it, to deny it when we must, to protect ourselves when we must. But we cannot be zealots. And as for religion, it's the same. I don't understand any kind of zealots. Muslim zealots, yes, here, say, no, I'm saying it. I don't understand them. I don't understand Christian zealots. I don't understand any bloody zealot. Because that is the position of an idiot. And only an idiot would not listen to the voice of the Tatar people, of what they want. And this is why I consider this manifestation so important. And this is why I consider that people should make streams about it. They should make videos about this. They should interview people. They should show what is happening to this culture. Because once a culture is lost, it's lost. I'll give you again. Look at Prussia. What happened to it? They are now the East German idiots of ADF, for example. They have perverted the old Prussian costumes and ethics in which I was raised in because of my grandfather that was raised that way by his mother. Sobriety, logic, truth, never lie, work ethics. Do they have anything of that? No. They are just screaming bloody murder at foreigners instead of finding solutions to solve it. You don't want foreigners? Very well. You're right. Do it like you used to do it because you stayed there. You know, I am the third generation here on that side of the family. I'm the third generation here. I don't have, I have my roots here. What are you expecting me to do? For example, for someone like me to go back to old Prussia and that is now Poland and do something about it? No, you were there. You did nothing about it. You let that mustache freak rise up to power and burn the country down. And now you are continuing to do the same shit. You have learned nothing. But that is a subject for another video, and I won't go into it because I don't want to offend anyone, and I don't even want to go there. But this is why I find it's very important to put this out there, to put out the will of the people that live in the land, to hear their voices before we start to make peace projects that include their land being given up to the Russian idiots. And to listen to Ukraine. Ukraine is absolutely right in saying that peace can only come when Russia leaves all of Ukraine. After that, we can discuss whatever they want. After that, you can discuss, for example, a non-militarized zone between Russia and Ukraine. But it would be on both sides. For example, no military Russian or Ukraine units or NATO units at the X distance of the border between the two areas, for example. A simple solution that will solve a lot of these problems. An access to a port in Crimea, if the Russians find it so important. Why not? That would not be violating the law of the land. A million possibilities can be put in an agreement and people can decide for it. But it is my view that now that it is Europe taking the lead on this because the United States and their weakling president have retreated like they should because they are cowards and they are Russian agents, in my opinion. or at least they are following their narrative and their policies. So for me, it's the same thing. Now that it is us Europeans discussing this, we need to give a voice to these people, to give a voice to the Tatars, because they deserve it, because it's their bloody land. Go watch that piece I told you. Just go on YouTube and write "deportation of Tatars in Soviet Union." Write that. Look for a video. Be careful with Russian disinformation because they are still in YouTube and very much active. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of people right here in the West that are either being paid or indoctrinated by them. And if you start to deconstruct their narratives, you will find it there. And this is not paranoid, this is not absolutely nothing. This is reality and logic because, as I told you, I fact checked everything. I pick up a piece of information and I try to see it like you were seeing a globe. Turn it around. See it from here to there, you know, because that is the only way you can have a clear view about things. And every time you start to let your emotions in, and I'm sorry, I am letting myself go a bit. I'm letting my emotions cloud me a bit here. You have to pull yourself back because it's natural. It's natural to feel emotions. It's natural to have reactions. What is not natural is not recognizing as what they are and going back, think again, and reason. Reason. People are lazy. People don't think. Well, sorry for my sanctimonious ranting. Uh, I ask you please to go and visit the site that I showed you, to go give them the view, to analyze their information, to cross-check it with others, and simply to recognize where you get your information from, which I think is a very important thing to do. Again, I'm not earning a penny out of these videos, so this is not monetized. I have a freedom that is a bit different from other people that are making contents about it. But even so, even people that are being monetized, they can use this information and make a better stream about it.